Hey y'all, welcome back to Girls Like You. My name is Mikhail, and in today's video I'm going to be talking to you guys about why I hate nursing. If you're interested in hearing my little chit chat about what's going on, a little life update, a little career update, then stay tuned. Alright y'all, so I wanted to start off with a little bit of background information about myself. I am 26 years old. I have been practicing as a registered nurse for almost 2 years in October. I currently work in a Burn ICU at a level 1 trauma center in North Carolina. And previous to nursing, I was working as a social worker. I provided case managerial services to children with behavioral health concerns and adults with co-occurring mental health and substance use disorders. Alright y'all, so I wanted to start with nursing school. First of all, I did not get into nursing school the first time. I actually ended up changing my major because I was upset about not getting in too. So that's how I returned to social work and finished that degree and started working as a case manager. And then after a couple of years, I always knew I was going back to nursing school. I reapplied and then I enrolled. My first semester of nursing school was my second semester of nursing school, horrible. Y'all, I failed med-surg and I ended up having to retake the class. At my school, if you failed, you had to wait an entire year before you could retake the class. You had to reapply, basically stating how this new year would be different and what you did during your year off to prepare for success in the next year. So I did that. I returned. Nursing school was extremely stressful. I did an accelerated program. Everything was fast-paced. I wasn't even upset with failing. I wasn't too disappointed in myself because I knew that I could do it and I would go back and I would complete it and finish it. I was salty, to say the least, but I mean, whatever. Like I said, me being so concerned the second time though, because you could only fail out one time. So this was my last chance and it was my second chance to get it right. Otherwise I was going to have to go to a different school and enroll in a different nursing program. And that really worried the heck out of me. I tried so hard to balance my stressors during the second year. I literally quit working. I only worked as much as I needed to. And yeah. My first year of nursing school, because I didn't know how to study and I didn't know how to prepare, I feel like what led to my failure in the course was trying to overcompensate in the initial class that I was failing, and I let one of them go to the wayside. I put it on the back burner. I also was still trying to work a lot of hours. I stayed up all night. I wasn't getting a lot of sleep. I had a lot of stress-induced anxiety that presented during my first year of nursing school. I started suffering from panic attacks. I actually had ailments and it was just horrible. So after finally finishing nursing school, I thought that I was going to be relieved. I figured I would take the NCLEX. It would be the hardest test I've ever taken. I would get through it and then I would begin working as a nurse and that would just be a breeze. Okay. So I took the NCLEX, I passed the NCLEX, and I always wanted to work in the ED, but I had the option of, I wasn't prepared to move where I wanted to move. So I either had the option of staying in Virginia or I could move, but I just wouldn't be able to go far. So I knew people in North Carolina, so I started applying for positions in both Virginia and North Carolina. I really wanted to go to an emergency department, but there weren't any emergency department opportunities available at the hospitals in North Carolina. So I applied for ICU positions, which isn't something that I was ever interested in because I didn't want to be a CRNA, or at least I thought I didn't want to be a CRNA at the time. So I applied for the positions in Virginia and a couple ICU positions, including the one that I'm on now in North Carolina. And ultimately, whenever I was offered the positions, I weighed the pros and the cons, and I went with the one that I thought would give me the most opportunity. So in Virginia, my options were to either stay at small community hospitals and work in their ED, or I could go to a verified burn center at a level 1 trauma center at one of the best hospitals in North Carolina, and that's ultimately what I decided to do. So when I moved to North Carolina, the biggest concern that I had was that I attended an HBCU for 6 years and all of my professional encounters were with upperly mobile Black men and women. So I hadn't really been a minority. I wasn't a minority for the past 6 years. In high school, I was the only Black girl in my class, and then I loved going to the HBCU afterwards because I never had to like change how I acted or pay attention to what I said or how I spoke, because everybody was the same color as me, or they had similar experiences as I did. So we kind of just understood each other, and I didn't feel forced to act out of character in any way. So I was really nervous about moving to North Carolina. I was nervous about working in a completely different population. I wasn't sure what the work culture was going to be like, and I was scared to feel alone again. So number one fear when coming into nursing was that I was like, oh, what's it like in North Carolina? I actually posted in a couple chats wondering, like, are there Black people there? Is this a unit where a lot of Black people go to work? But whatever, I went. And then when I got there actually wasn't an issue with that, and I actually still am the only Black girl on not the only Black girl, but I am one of the only Black people that work in my unit, and one of the only Black girls that works on my unit. But like I said, I didn't say this, but I'm extremely adaptable, so it wasn't going to make a difference to me either way. But I was used to all of my co-workers really becoming like good friends of mine, but I also worked in a different setting, so my hours were different. I worked Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, so we literally saw each other every day, to the nursing schedule of 3/12s on random days each week. So anyway, I got to my unit, and I have 4 months of orientation, and let me just tell y'all, the entire 4 months I hated it. It was one thing being a nursing student and failing out of nursing school once, but whenever I actually became registered and I started working and I was licensed, and a lot of the decisions I was making were my own, and I was responsible for these patients and their care, I was nervous, I was scared. I often found myself comparing my skills to others, and I truly hated it. I've never really compared myself to other people before nursing, and it was just a horrible feeling. Like every day I went to work and I felt incompetent, I was scared, I was nervous, I didn't know what to expect, and I just feel like I was in an awkward place. My work my experiences as a social worker were different, because I think that the line of communication was a little bit different. I was professional all the time, but how I spoke to my clients was a little bit more relaxed. There wasn't a lot of medical jargon that was used, and ultimately the settings were just a little easier to adapt to. I did a lot of work in the field. I went into a lot of my clients' homes, so it was just a lot more laid back, so it was an easier transition for me. After my 4 months of orientation, like I said, I hated it. I spent the majority of my orientation on day shift, but I was actually going to be working as a full-time night shift nurse, which didn't bother me too much, but I would have liked to spend the majority of my orientation on the actual shift that I was going to be working, and I didn't. So when I got used to all of the nurses that I worked on the day shift with, I had 3 weeks of orientation on nights with people I had never met, and I had to build a new rapport with each of them. And it was fine, but it was one of the things that made me nervous initially during the orientation. And then of course there's the whole night shift versus day shift thing, and I was worried that they would be like, what have they taught you on day shift? What? No. Anyway, so while we're still on the topic of orientation though, at the end of my orientation, I counted how many preceptors I had, and y'all, I'm pretty sure I had at least 20, if not more. So that made my orientation a little bit harder too, because every day it was something different. I would be taught one way by one preceptor, and then the next day that preceptor wouldn't be there, and I would be with somebody else, and they would be like, oh no, don't do it like that. And then the third day I would be with somebody else, and they'd be like, who taught you that? And then the next day it would be like, why are you doing it like that? And then the next day it would be, stop right there, you're doing it wrong. So that got frustrating a lot of times, because I feel like I had a couple instances where it came off to like family members that were present in the room while I was receiving this teaching, as if I didn't know what I was doing, even though I was on orientation. So that was kind of okay for me to not completely know what I was doing. But a lot of times whenever I was being corrected, it would, and not even negatively, but you know, parents of children take that the wrong way, or can sometimes misinterpret my training as like, if she's an incompetent nurse and I don't want her to take care of my kid or my family member. So there was a time that something like that happened, and the preceptor corrected me, and the patient's family didn't want me whenever I came off of orientation, which I was completely fine with. It didn't bother me any. Okay, fine. I just feel like because there wasn't any consistency amongst preceptors, I ran into situations like that fortunately they didn't really make me uncomfortable, but I think that they were preventable. So then after my 4 months of orientation, I still was scared. I still was upset with how my orientation went, like I said, because I bounced around from preceptor to preceptor, and I hadn't really found my own niche yet. So I was just nervous to take care of these patients on my own. It took me until April of 2019 for me to even get comfortable coming to work. I worked in the ICU. It was a critical care environment. So, and then my unit is small. We would maybe have three if lucky nurses on the unit at the time, and no NAs. So if I was sitting at the nurses station and one of the other nurses was in the med room and the other nurse was in a patient's room, and the alarms get to dinging and going crazy, I'm sitting there like, oh shit, I haven't learned this yet. What do I do? I'm scared. I'm nervous. So I had a lot of hard nights because I was just scared, honestly. So I used to put on my game face and would really focus whenever I got to work, because I always tried to prepare myself for the worst, because there were a lot of things that I didn't get to see during my orientation. I was nervous to see them for the first time while I was off of orientation. I also worked with a lot of float pool nurses too during the start of my or during my time right after orientation. So I wasn't even with nurses that had worked in my specialty area. So a lot of the float nurses, so they were experienced in a lot of other ICUs. They still came and had a lot of questions about burns specifically, and that made me a little uncomfortable, because I felt like I was the resource whenever it came to certain things, and I wasn't even comfortable yet. So anyway, from pretty much the start of my nursing career, from October to April, I did not like working at all. I dreaded going, and while I was there, I crossed my fingers and prayed for a good night and just hoped that I got through the shift so that I could be home and go to sleep. So, and this is just me being transparent with y'all. Yes, I work in the ICU. Yes, it's been 2 years now, but it's okay to be scared. I begged to go. I wanted to go to areas that they didn't typically accept new grad nursing students, but this is exactly what I asked for. So I try not to complain too much, but it was what it was. Like, you don't have to fake act happy when you're not. And that's something that I just came to terms with at year 2. So then from there on out, during that time, like I said, I really I hadn't really enjoyed nursing yet. On top of the fact that I was in a new state, I had few friends. I didn't have a whole lot of money saved before I came. And all of my friends that I did have at the time were also enrolled in school. So whenever I would work my 3 days a week and I would get off, I would be like, okay, what's there to do? Where's there to go? And there wasn't really a whole lot for me to do. So I felt myself kind of like sinking into a hole, really feeling like, oh, I hate it here. I want to go. I want to leave. I want to do something else. But I hadn't gotten completely comfortable with my job yet. So by the time my 1 year mark came around, I wasn't even prepared to do anything else. I kind of engulfed myself in my sorrows and pitied myself a little bit for feeling how I felt during my first year. And with that being said, I never worked any extra. I barely worked any extra overtime, so I didn't save a whole lot of money, and I didn't prepare myself for a big move to a state that I actually wanted to be in. Towards the end of the year though, things did lighten up a little bit. We got a group of new grads that came, and I precepted a few of them, and that made me feel better about my skills as a nurse. Like, I always knew that I was smart, I always knew that I was skillful, I always knew that I was a quick learner and had good time management. It was just my personal feelings. Like, I have a lot of anxiety, so my brain is like always running. I think about one thing that could go wrong, and then I have a bunch of different scenarios in my head, or I have a bunch of questions about ways to prevent this or ways to treat this, and that kind of just used to make me nervous. And then whenever this new group of nurses came along, I was responsible for teaching them some of the things that they needed to know about our unit specifically, and just about nursing in general. And that really made me feel better about myself and what I knew. I didn't feel like I was incompetent. I didn't have the same feelings that I had whenever I initially started working on the unit. And all in all, it made things a little bit better for me. But once they left, once they finished their orientation, then I went back to taking the patients and being the primary nurse for them. And it was cool up until April or March, I want to say, of this past year. And then COVID happened. When COVID happened, our unit actually ended up being overstaffed, and the other hospital units ended up being short-staffed. And I had always planned on, not transferring, but I had always planned on like floating around to other units, other ICUs to get experience. But by the time my 1 year mark came, I had literally just started feeling good about the unit that I was on, and I wasn't ready to go to other units. I was too scared to float to other units and feel the way I felt when I first got to my unit. So I kind of got complacent and didn't make any changes, and eventually me sitting on my unit for so long started to bother me. So when COVID happened, we were forced to float, and I got experiences on other units. And I mean, I had floated to other units before, but it was happening like every day we went to work, or every other day when we went to work, we were floating to another unit. So I got a lot of experience in, and I spoke to a lot of float pool nurses that made me feel like I was capable of doing it too. So after that kind of died down and we quit having to float all the time, I was back on my unit. And like I said, I'm on a burn unit. It's a trauma unit. Nobody wants to be in the hospital, period. But on burn specifically, I feel like they are a completely different type of patient. You can experience some type of trauma and end up on a trauma ICU, or end up in a MICU, or end up in a neuro ICU. But burns affects you completely different. These patients battle with depression and others that come in with other mental health diagnoses that they just had before they even came to the unit. So they battle with depression, they battle with PTSD, and then they have the psychological, and so they have all of these changes, and then they also have the physical change in their appearance on top of it that makes things a lot harder. It's like if I broke my leg, then I could, I might walk with a little limp or something, but you won't have to know unless you see me walk. People will come in with burns, and they're worried about their grafting or what their skin will look like after they heal, and that is a big concern for a lot of patients. And to be honest with y'all, I was one of those people who was intrigued by what a burn victim's appearance was like after it healed before I actually went to the unit. I was one of those people that I could be sitting here behind my blinds and squinting, just trying to get a better picture of like what they looks like. And I try not to be rude about it, but I still can understand how my patients felt. But a lot of times they were in bad moods, they were negative, they were hurting really bad, and it kind of became like a toxic environment for me to work in, because I was upset that I had stayed on my unit for so long, past a year. I hadn't made any accommodations to move out of town. I hadn't prepared. I felt lonely because I didn't have many friends. I had a lot of things that I was upset with in my personal life. And then whenever I got to work and I had these patients that were also like on edge, they just clashed, and I got to a point where I hated going to work. I hated it. And for me, it was like rocky to begin with. Like, I didn't start up here, I started here, and then when things got better, I was like around here, but I never actually reached my peak. I never felt like I reached my full potential on the unit. And then I had the combination of like my issues mixed with like my patient's issues, and I like sunk again. And I dealt with it for a little while, and then the new grads that had came after me started to like phase out and go on and do other things that they felt like would make them more happy, and it kind of inspired me. I was like, why are you still here? What are you doing? You're normally not like that. So there were a lot of things about myself that I feel like were that had changed since I became a nurse, and I just needed to take control of who I was and what I was capable of again before I could decide that I was ready to leave. So ultimately, I don't actually hate nursing. I just did not enjoy my first 2 years as a nurse. I don't think I ever reached the point where I was genuinely happy with what I was doing. Of course, I would always be happy whenever I would get patients. I would like extend thank yous and want hugs, and family members that were just so appreciative of me for being there and taking care of their family members. And that would always like bring joy to me, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't sustainable. My patients also ended up being on my patients also are there pretty long. So part of the reasons why I wouldn't look forward to going to work is because I knew who would be there. I knew what to, like, I had expectations when I came in, and I missed the spontaneity. I missed the spontaneous like aspect of nursing where I could go in and not know what to expect. Ultimately, what it boiled down to is me just never really feeling complete with the position, and then starting to like be upset with me for even allowing that to happen. And then I got comfortable and I was scared to move on. And then whenever it was time to move on, I was overwhelmed with the number of opportunities I had to go to other units, and I was planning to go back to grad school, and I couldn't decide what population would be best fit for my end career goals. And I was like, I'm gonna just stay here for a little bit longer. But as of now, I have created a new plan. I have decided to leave, and maybe I'll save that video for another day. But all in all, y'all, I do not hate nursing. I just 5 out of 10 my first couple years, and that's just me personally. Like, it's nothing against my unit. It's nothing against other nurses. I didn't suffer with like the whole nurses eat their young thing. All of my preceptors, so they had very different teaching styles. They were all great. I actually learned a lot, and I appreciate having, though I didn't like it, I can appreciate having so many different experiences, because I have different ways that I go about doing things, and I know different methods for doing them that I know still work. And then now that COVID has happened, it kind of opened my eyes to like what opportunities I would have if I just got out and did it. Like all of these hazard pay and new contract assignments that are open and available. These are like, though unfortunate, these are once in a lifetime experiences for nurses. unless you plan on being a nurse for what, 50 years, because the last pandemic was how many years ago? Yes, like I said, unfortunate. A lot of people don't want to go out and work in this pandemic, but if I'm going to be a nurse and I'm going to have to work regardless, then I might as well get the hazard pay, you know? So there's a lot of things that I wasn't capable of doing because I had decided to continue working as a full-time nurse on a unit that I didn't even want to be on anymore. And I decided that I wasn't going to do that no more. I was going to find something else. I was going to suck it up, and I was going to make a plan so that I could do better and work on my happiness, because I'm naturally a happy person. And for me to just feel miserable every time I went to work, no, that wasn't cool. I couldn't have that. I couldn't keep that going. So, y'all, here I am. I still love nursing. I'm still going to continue in nursing, but I am taking some prereqs now. I plan on applying to PA school next year. So next time you see me, hopefully my update is going to be positive, because y'all, I have so many other personal endeavors too. And I'm hoping that with this new chapter in my life, I can focus more on things that bring me joy and not clocking these hours. So if you guys like this video, if y'all are interested in more content like this, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, hit that subscribe and the post notification bell so that you're notified every time I post a new video. If you have any content suggestions, then comment them below. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.